Thank you so much for joining us here on the Dwelling Show. I'm your host, Ola Dantes. I've got Jim Maffuccio with us today. How you doing, Jim?
Doing great, Ola. How you doing?
Doing fantastic. So let's kind of get a little bit more about you, Jim. What are you doing right now? What are you about? What are you kind of, doing in the real estate space?
Well, I'm currently involved. I'm a co-founder and principal of a company called Aspen Funds, and we are a fund management company, as it turns out, and focused currently in the distressed residential mortgage space. And the particular niche that we are in and have been focused in is actually junior liens within the distressed debt space. So we have two sides of our business. We purchase non-performing junior liens, and then we have a workout operation and a workout office that takes and modifies those loans or tries to execute a successful conclusion. And then we also have an income side of our business, which buys reperforming mortgages or performing cash flows secured by real estate. So it's kind of we have two wings, and the bird's flying pretty well right now. So I manage that. We've got, I think we just grew to 17 or maybe our 18th employee. We're pretty much a virtual company. I'm located in Colorado, and our main headquarters is in Kansas City. And we have our workout office in Baltimore, Maryland area.
Oh, nice. So we're neighbors. Yeah, fantastic. In Baltimore anyways. Yeah. So it's really interesting because I read your story and you actually did some flips, right? Back in the day, and now you kind of shifted into a more, quasi-passive, right? Or maybe passive investment. So can you kind of just compare those two activities, flipping a house, or actually investing in notes before we actually get
Sure.
to the definition of notes?
Yeah, well, first of all, you started with the flipping. So I'll just say that represented for me kind of an interim transitional period that was in the 2009, 10, and 11 timeframe. Up till that point, for about 30 years, I've been in full-time self-employed real estate entrepreneur since 1986. Just to back up a little bit, I was actually a civil engineer working as a project engineer for a large oil company for the first 6 years out of college, and I got the entrepreneurial bug and got my real estate license in California in 1985. And then in 1986, I went full-time self-employed and almost immediately got involved in real estate development. So that's mostly what I had done for 30 years is real estate projects. I would buy raw land and do the process the subdivision, build the houses, the whole 9 yards. Well, I went through two of the ups and down cycles in Southern California. And of course, they were very related to what was happening in the mortgage industry, and the subprime crisis of the that we recently went through. And prior to that, there was the S&L crisis. That's how old I am. That was back in the mid 90s. So I ended up in Kansas City with 5 teenagers, and really had completely lost my business and all of my assets, and went through a really dark time in a testing time. So that's what got me to flipping houses. I could see that after the mortgage crisis, there was opportunity everywhere, and I needed to be able to drive to a paycheck. So I knew I could buy a bank-owned property for $25,000, and I could put 40 or 50 into it and sell that property for 100. So it was kind of a no-brainer after doing development work. But in 2010, I went to my first, I wanted to build a business again, a scalable business, and not just keep doing a flip here and a flip there. And so I actually went to a conference where I learned about being on the other side of the debt picture and actually being the lender. And so there was a growing number of people that would buy these non-performing mortgages. So instead of waiting for the banks to foreclose and then you buy the foreclosed properties from the banks, we would buy the loans before they went to foreclosure that were non-performing, and then we would execute exit strategies. So I started that in 2011. I jumped in with both feet, and then in 2012, I met my business partner, Bob Frazier, and we formed Aspen Funds together. And honestly, I thought this was going to be a 2 or 3 year opportunistic pursuit. And here we are, 7 years down the road, and we have a company. We're in this space in a big way, and we're growing. Seems like we're doubling every year right now. So it started as an entrepreneurial venture, and now we have a fund management company. So.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you for giving us that synopsis. And it's really interesting, right, for notes, because when you speak to real estate entrepreneurs like myself and others, when you think of notes, just in general, you think of paper assets. You just struggle to connect that piece of paper to real estate, right? Even though
Right.
we all know that real estate is actually always backed by a piece of paper, right? Deed, right? Every time, that's what the banks use, but just to think of it from an investing perspective is always hard for us. So for you though, how easy was it? You said you went to a seminar. How easy was it for you to leave that flipping business at the time and go into just a paper type investing?
Yeah. So for me, it was a little easier because, again, I had 30 years background in real estate. And as you just very well pointed out, Ola, real estate is all about the financing. At the end of the day, what's going on in the debt space is going to determine, the cycles in the market for the hard assets. So getting involved in the paper, I look at it like this. Before I was buying and taking possession of the physical structure and rehabbing the structure. Now I'm buying the paper and rehabbing the paper. So we're stepping into the role of the lender. And a lot of people in our industry like to say, and it's kind of funny, but it's true, when you drive through any city or town in America, you never see the rehabbers names up at the top of the big buildings, right? It's the banks. So there's a clue there. It's the banks don't lose, in the long run. And so controlling that lien and not having to deal with the physical aspects of the property. Now, I have to say, I love real estate, and I'm still involved in the asset end of the business. I actually think it's a combination is wise. But as far as a scalable business model, we can touch a lot more value by working paper, by working the loans, than we can real property, just because of the the leverage that you get, the leverage on your time. We don't have to deal with tenants and the toilets and trash and the physical aspects of the property. We need to know what, that's our collateral. So we're interested in the property, but 99.5 times out of 100, we're never going to have to step foot on the property or get to know, what the bedrooms on the inside look like. So it's a very clean business from that standpoint. It's got its own challenges, like everything. I'm not going to sit here and tell everybody that it's easy, but it was a nice change for me, having dealt with a lot of physical property, to be involved in the softer end of the business, if I could say that.
Right. And also, passive, right? Passive income, passive investing. That's, there's a lot of buzzword in the real
Right.
estate investing space. And there's a lot of folks that are actually working and they have a 9-to-5 job that they're trying to still hold on to, right? But at the same time, have something on the side. So talking about not dealing with tenants, toilets, and trash, one of our dual listeners might be thinking, wow, hey, I wanna do this. I don't want to deal with tenants. I don't want to deal with contractors. I like the sound of this. Maybe I like accounting and I like numbers or whatever. What would you say to that person? And after that, can you also go through, kind of start to finish, a typical junior lien, deal?
Sure. So the first part of the question, there's basically 3 ways to get involved in the note business, and I'll start with the one that's really not as passive, and that would be buying non-performing mortgages. So typically, there are places you can buy them on a single loan basis, but typically you buy a larger pool, or you partner up with somebody that's buying a larger pool of these. And so then you have to go to work on figuring out how to get that loan, how to add value to that piece of paper. Because right now you've got a lien against a property somewhere, and then you've got a payment stream that's owed but has been discontinued for whatever reason. So you have to work that loan. And so there's servicers out there, there's loss mitigation companies, there's attorneys. So it's not completely passive. I mean, you are definitely having to apply some work and some ingenuity to that situation to get that, to add value to that loan. And the best way to add value is to get the loan reperforming again, get the borrower paying. So as far as you mentioned passive, I will say this though, even with that non-passive end of the business, you can handle hundreds of loans all across the country, sitting anywhere in the country. I was sitting anywhere in the world, really. All you really need is access to your communications. So it is more passive from that standpoint, but you do have to apply work to get these assets performing again. On the passive side, there's two ways to get involved, and one is to invest in a company's funds, and we structure our business around, we create funds around the various pursuits and buying these loans, and then we do all the workouts, and we split that profit with our investors. The other way to get involved passively is to buy cash flowing loans. So there's a lot of people that are getting involved in that end of the business with their self-directed IRAs, for instance, where they can pick up a 8, 9, 10, and even up to a 15% return on their money by simply buying a reperforming or a cash flowing note. And again, you have that loan taken care of through a servicer that's sending out the statements and doing all of that, because you really don't want to be directly involved with the borrower unless you're very savvy in terms of regulatory compliance. But it's a passive business model until that borrower stops making the payments. And like everything in life, it's not a perfect world. 100% of them don't pay 100% of the time. So then it turns into a non-performing loan, which you can either sell to somebody that does that kind of work, or you can get involved in getting that paper performing again. So those are the three basic ways you get involved in the space. You jump in with both feet and start buying non-performing loans, or you buy just performing loans if you just need the cash flow, or you can invest in mortgage funds, and there's several of them out there, including our own. So.
That's fascinating. So if I'm, a newbie-ish, and I say, hey, I'm going to go out into the marketplace and I'm going to pick up one of this non-performing, notes, how successful would I be?
Well, again, that's what, if you're going to go out there and buy one note, then you've got a 50-50 chance. You're either going to be successful with that one note, or you're going to lose with that one note. And I'm being a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's honestly, in the non-performing note space, it's not a great business to jump into on a super small scale by yourself. I did, because I was starting from scratch. I went out and bought my first 5 notes, and I actually was able to make singles with a couple of them, a double with one of them, and a home run with the other 2. Now maybe that was beginner's luck. I mean, there is an art and a science to evaluating these loans and figuring out which ones you want to buy. And every state has different foreclosure laws, for instance, and foreclosure rights, and there's statute of limitations where you need to make sure that you're buying debt that's actually legally collectible. So there's a lot to it, but the information and the education is available. So if somebody wants to jump in, they can definitely get the education. That's what I did. I started going to conferences and I started reading on it. There's plenty of material online, and you can pretty quickly figure out what the moving parts are, and then decide where you want to jump in. But again, one way to jump in is to do it with someone that's already doing it, and be kind of a passive investor and just watch the way they do it, or go to conferences. I mean, there's a lot of folks that are conference junkies out there. I actually was one, still am. I love education. I'm always learning new stuff. And we've grown our company by going to conferences, from the people that we've hired that are now our significant senior leadership team, all the way to the sources that we buy these loans from. We've pretty much met them all at conferences, because it's a niche out there. We're a little tribe, a growing tribe. So, that's that.
Okay, awesome. So you also, I also read about zero equity notes. What are those? Can you explain what those are?
Yeah, so first of all, we are invested mostly in junior liens. So what that is a person has a house, maybe they bought the house and they took out a first mortgage of 80% of the value, and then they came in with only 5% down payment, so they got a second on their house or a home equity line for the 15%. It's a smaller loan. Um, so that second, a lot of times people will continue making their payments on the first, because if you stop making payments on the first, you're going to hear about it pretty quickly. Your foreclosure is going to start against you. If you stop making payments on the second, however, most of the institutions that originated these, I'll say all of the institutions that originated these second mortgages, those mortgages are treated differently from the institutions. They're actually considered consumer debt. So an institution will not foreclose in general from second position, or they won't foreclose that junior lien, because they are not in the business of wanting to own property. And if you foreclose from second position, you actually, in most states, you actually end up with the property, but subject to the first, which is still against the property. So in some states, you have to pay the first off, but in most states, you do not. You actually can reinstate that first lien. So now you are the owner of the property, but it's got this first mortgage that you got to figure out how to pay, or maybe you're just going to fix the house up and flip it, and then the first gets paid off at that point in time. So we talk to investors that are used to the first mortgage space, where everything is about the equity in the property. In other words, if I buy a non-performing first mortgage, and the first thing I'm going to find out is there somebody in the property, or is it vacant? If there's somebody in the property, then I'm going to have to either very quickly get them paying again or start the foreclosure process. So I'm going to end up spending some time and money to foreclose. And if there's not enough equity, if the property's not worth more than what my cost going in, then it's not a very good business model, right? So with a junior lien, however, and we buy these most of the time where the senior lien is still paying. And we have ways of knowing that, and we have the right to know that, what's going on with the senior lien. So if the borrower's in a house and they're making payments on their senior lien, there's what we call emotional equity. So even if our loan is underwater, the second mortgage is underwater, we know that that person has already demonstrated that they want to keep the house, they want to stay in the house. It's usually their principal residence, so they're taking care of it. We can have a realtor go by and take pictures on the outside and see that the property's being well taken care of. And it's a pretty good rule of thumb. If the lawn is mowed and the cars are clean, and the place, there's not sofas sitting around in the front seat, chances are the inside of the house is in good shape too. And so you have somebody that wants to stay, and frankly, we can help them stay. And that's really a big part of our mission as well. We're very profitable, but we actually forgive a heck of a lot of debt, because we're able to buy these junior mortgages at pennies on the dollar. And we average about 15 to 16% of what's owed on that loan, or 15% of UPB, or unpaid principal value. So we have a leverage factor there. So even if there's not equity above our investment in the property, we can pretty much look at a person's profile and determine their motivation to stay in the property. And if they're motivated to stay, we can usually forgive some principal, modify the terms of their loan, of their second, to where it makes a lot of sense for them to stay. In a lot of these cases also, Ola, what they're making, the payments they're making on their first, and when you add that to a small payment that we want them to start making on the second, a lot of times that overall payment for to stay in their home is less than what they would rent the same house for. So where are they going to go? Now, I will say there are cases where they throw their hands up and they walk away, or they become adversarial and they fight with us. And you definitely can lose part of your investment in this business. But again, if you get smart about the way you buy these, and you make it an aim to help people on a going-in basis, which we do, we truly want to help people. We want to help solve a problem that's out there. It usually works out. I mean, 85% of the time we successfully either keep a person in their home or help them move on and put some money in their pocket. And it's usually a positive outcome with these things.
Thank you so much for breaking that down. So we're definitely dwelling into the quick rounds. These are going to be quick questions, quick answers. You ready, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right. First question. What makes you, Jim, unique? What is that differentiating factor that separates you from the next guy or the next girl? You can mention Aspen Funds too if you want.
Okay. Well, what makes me unique, first of all, is I'm older than most people getting into this, getting into this thing. So honestly, I do have experience, real deep real estate experience, as well as a project management background as an engineer before that. What makes our company unique, our Aspen Funds, is we have actually focused in on this niche of junior liens, and we've really put together some pretty elegant business models, and it's become very profitable, and we're very scalable because of my business partner's experience in scaling companies, and my experience in finding opportunities and building models on how to create a profitable opportunity. So we're growing like crazy right now.
Fantastic. Second question. What was the last book that you read, and what was the one thing you picked out from that book?
Well, the book that I read on an ongoing and continual daily basis is the Bible. And the one thing I take away from it every time is love God because he loves me greatly.
Yeah, good book. Great book, actually.
Great book.
Yeah.
Bestseller of all times, by the way.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Last one. Obviously, you're managing Aspen Funds with your partner, Bob. You're obviously coming on different podcasts. You've got seminars going on, got
Right.
conferences. What do you do for fun?
Like I said, I moved to Colorado 2.5 years ago, my wife and I, and we're now empty nesters, having raised 5 kids, and they're all off and doing well on their own. So we love the mountains. We go hiking, we go bicycling, and I love skiing. I've picked that back up again here in my 60s. Used to do it as a 20-year-old, and I would like to say it's just like riding a bike, but it's really not just like riding a bike.
Wow, that's
So
awesome.
we love the outdoors. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jim. If there's a dual listener listening on our conversation and they're thinking, wow, I really like Jim, I want to know more about junior liens, what's the best place people can reach out to you, get connected with you?
Right. The very best way to do that would be to go to our website. It's aspenfunds.us. So that's ASPENFUNDS.us. And there's a contact us link. And if you click on that and just give us your email address or whatever information it asks for, one of us will get back in touch. There's also some good information on the website, talks a little bit more about what we do. And it's possible that you'd be qualified to invest with our funds. You'd have to talk to the representative that gets back in touch with you on that. But there's a resources page where you can learn a little bit more about our industry, and you can reach out through that link. And if it just, we're very personable, we're relational. So if someone has a question on how would I get started in this space on my own, we can point you to some educators and to some conferences to attend, and look forward to bumping into some of your audience at some of the conferences and whatnot.
Thank you so much, Jim. I really, really appreciate your time today. It's been a pleasure. I learned a ton myself. Thank you so much.
It's been my honor. Thank you, Allah.